Hello everyone and welcome to Audiobookish. This is an audiobook review and discussion podcast. My name is Fahed Rahman and I'm joined by Poppy Knight.
Hello.
And this is the first in a special series of podcasts we're doing about the nominated books on the shortlist for the Audio Book of the Year fiction for the British Book Awards. They've kindly sent us some review copies. So the next 3 episodes are going to be reviews of the books on the shortlist there, and we're going to be starting off with The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell and The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. Poppy.
Yes, okay, so I'll start off with the blurb for The Night She Disappeared. A cold case, an abandoned mansion. A family hiding a terrible secret. Prepare to be hooked. Lisa Jewell's latest thriller is her best yet. Midsummer 2017. Teenage mum Tallulah heads out on a date, leaving her baby son at home with her mother Kim. At 11 p.m, she sends her mum a text message. At 4:30 a.m, Kim awakens to discover that Tallulah has not come home. Friends tell her that Tallulah was last seen heading to a pool party at a house in the woods nearby called Dark Place. Tallulah never returns. 2018. Walking in the woods behind the boarding school where her boyfriend has just started as a head teacher, Sophie sees a sign nailed to a fence, a sign that says, "Dig here."
And I'll read out the author bio. Lisa Jewell was born in London in 1968. Her first novel, Ralph's Party, was a best-selling debut novel of 1999. Since then, she has written another 18 novels, most recently a number of dark psychological thrillers, including The Girls, Then She Was Gone, The Family Upstairs, all of which were Richard and Judy Book Club picks. Lisa is a New York Times and Sunday Times #1 best-selling author who's been published worldwide in 25 languages. She lives in North London with her husband, 2 teenage daughters, 1 cat, 1 guinea pig, and the best dog in the world. And this audiobook was narrated by Joanne Froggatt. So do you want to kind of start off with your initial thoughts, Poppy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure, I can do. Okay, so the first thing I've got here is that the tone is creepy and sad. Like the thing of, but they don't know what was going to happen next, is sort of what I had. And I found that especially with the audiobook. I mean, we are the audiobook podcast. We are doing this because these books have been nominated for an award in their audio format. And yeah, I really found that you wouldn't necessarily get that in the print. There's things that are talking about this party, a pool party, and things like that. And yet the tone of the narration is very somber. You know from the start something bad is going to happen, even though, you know, there's lots of light kind of words, but they're not necessarily said light. And so that was kind of my first impression. I enjoyed that going into it. And then as it was going, I was like, yes, it's a good crime book. I enjoy crime. I enjoy watching crime TV shows, reading crime books, listening to crime books. I'm a big fan of the genre. And I was like, yeah, it's a good one. I will be honest, I didn't know what would be particularly special about it, was my thought for the first part of it. For a good while, I was enjoying it, but I didn't know what there was to shout home about. It then hit kind of near to the halfway point, and I got very, very into it. And the last half, I absolutely devoured, and I loved it, and I do think there's something special about this book now. And yeah, so for me, it was a bit of a slow burner, but I really, really enjoyed it in the end. I think all that kind of slow burniness really built it up for me and got me to the point where I was really invested and really enjoying it. So yeah, that's my overall thoughts. What about you?
I just wanted to comment quickly. It's curious that you said it was kind of slow burn, because I think that's a comment that's come up a lot in a lot of the reviews that I've seen of this. So
really?
I just did
Okay.
a quick review. I did a quick look on kind of what other people thought of it, and like slow burn and the pacing came up quite often in a lot of those reviews. I really enjoyed this. So to get that kind of like spoiler out of the way, I kind of agree with you, because the story's told from 3 point of view characters. So we've got Tallulah, we've got Kim, and then we've got Sophie. And yeah, the initial point of view that we discover the story from is from Kim's point of view. She's putting her grandson to kind of like sleep, and it does really kind of like pick up pace in the second half. Once what she does really well in this book is she makes you care about the characters.
Definitely.
And then when she does kind of pick up the pace, you're really invested in terms of what happens to them. You're really keen to find out what the truth is and who did what to whom, and all that sort of kind of stuff that you really, which is what you want when you're reading a psychological thriller. That's, you want to be invested. You want to care about the characters. You want to care about what happens to them. And so that's kind of what my initial impressions about it were.
Yeah, no, that's very fair, and completely agree. And with you talking about those perspectives as well, so what this book does is it flicks between events pre the night she disappeared, and then events a good time later. And so you get pieces of information from both stories, and they don't overlap. Like Fahad said, it's Tallulah's perspective when we're looking at the before stuff, and she's obviously not around after she's disappeared, so we don't have her perspective there. We have the perspective of other people either in her life or in some ways not in her life, and so we as the listener get to piece together things from both sides of it. And seeing how those things tie together really cleverly. I mean, you can tell that this is an experienced crime writer, from all the stuff that you said in that bio of her really plays out. You can tell this is not her first rodeo. It was really clever how all those chapters slotted into each other. Even just, the general builds more tension because you have to wait another chapter to find out the carry on from the one that you've just finished, so even just that, but the way that they are cut together is absolutely fabulous. So I think that was a really, really clever thing with the writing. Definitely.
So it must have been quite a complex novel to write because you've got I think 3 timelines. Basically you've got before, and then you've got 3 different perspectives as well, so kind of like making sure that you're not revealing information that one character wouldn't have known at the time. So kind of like all those different jigsaw pieces that you'd have to put together. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of 3 point of view characters we've got. Let's start off with Tallulah. I really fell in love with Tallulah a little bit, and kind of her storyline of being a young mum, kind of sort of in this relationship she doesn't really want to be in, and kind of the responsibilities of being a mother, but also that being really young and wanting to go out and meet exciting new people and live your own life for yourself without any responsibilities, and kind of how there's like an internal struggle there. I really quite enjoyed, and even though I'm nearing my 40s, I still feel like that's kind of like we're always constantly searching for that feeling of having a bit more freedom and going on an adventure somewhere, but also being kind of weighed down by responsibilities. Well, how did you feel about
no, I feel very similarly. She is very likable, and sort of she is certainly a lot of the time in the book is quite meek, but not in a way that you could potentially dislike, I don't think. I mean, obviously, potentially people could, but, it's not that sort of meekness. She is quite a meek character, but as you say, she has dreams and ambitions and things like that, and a lot of confidence in there within her, but maybe she needs to search to find it kind of thing. It's very much a more endearing meekness where you want her to break through that rather than kind of frustration. And I guess I'm sort of meaning because it's not like, in the realms of crime fiction, it's not just a sort of meek victim-y character that gets tossed away, She is very much a full one, and it is, really nice seeing those different bits of her personality, and yes, very likeable, and a mix of, you can definitely see why she ends up in some situations that she's in, as well as also, which she even comments herself, you see ways of, you really hope she might have made a different choice to not follow down that path, And that's another thing with obviously knowing stuff that happens in the future timeline,
Yes.
You're like, oh, I really wanted to do this thing, but I know she must not, because then this wouldn't happen, or, okay, but if it does, how does it? And that definitely happens throughout, that you're guessing, okay, I'm sure this must happen and this mustn't happen, but how do these things add up, and that sort of stuff. But no, I think she's a really likeable character that, it's nice that we get to see so much of her kind of inner brain and inner workings and get to know her really well.
Yeah, and I think, like, for me, she is the one that disappeared, so she is at the heart of the novel. So we do really need to understand from her perspective why she takes certain decisions that she takes, and like all the decisions she kind of makes are kind of understandable from a certain perspective, even though they certainly frustrated me.
Yeah, and you can see something you wish. Yeah.
Just grab hold of her and shake her and just like, oh no, that's okay.
Yeah.
But then there wouldn't be a novel. And then we've got Kim, her mother, who again is a really likable character as well. I really like the stuff with her at the beginning, where it's kind of describing her journey on being like a parent, and how she only wanted 2 children because she really values her sleep, and how much
understandable
how much it means for her to sacrifice her sleep to stay up with her grandson and to kind of look after him, and her kind of like personal, we hear about a lot of the sacrifices that she's made, and how much she loves her children and cares for them, and her family dynamic with both her daughter and her son and with Zach, I found was kind of quite compelling. And I just there's certain things that Tallulah keeps from Kim that I really wish that
she didn't.
Wish she didn't, but you can kind of also understand at the same time why she keeps those things from her as well. And it just made me realize it doesn't really matter how close you are to your parents, there's always going to be that barrier there. And that I thought that was a really interesting dynamic of a parent realizing how little they actually know about their child. So that's another thing that I found quite enjoyable.
Yeah, and there's definitely so many parts in there where you really do just wish she'd said something to Kim, and certainly I was. You're led to believe that would have solved things. But as you say, some of how she didn't see the things that, we wish she'd been told. And, maybe gave Tallulah that impression that she wouldn't fix everything for her, or I don't know, but there was definitely, some barrier with not opening up to her about it. And obviously there are other reasons why, opening up to her could have been difficult and could have made things worse and various things like that. But that is a really sad part of the book, is that could you not have just definitely no agree with that. And
I'm just saying, kind of like from Tallulah's point of view, I kind of got a little bit of a subtext from like Tallulah's point of view that maybe she felt that her mum might have noticed some of the behavior and felt that it was like normalized and okay, and maybe that's another reason that she kind of didn't bring it up. But I
hadn't particularly got that vibe, but you can definitely read that into it, I reckon. And I think, like you were saying, important stuff about Kim as a motherly figure, obviously to her own children, to her grandson, especially when she has to step in for her grandson. And there's a lot in that where it talks about the reality of kids can be difficult. And it's all right to say like, oh, this kid's being really annoying, and I wish I didn't have to be looking after him. But it was also, I thought, a really good thing, and rather a crux of why she is so determined to find out what happened to her daughter, because this isn't what Tallulah felt about Noah. Like, she found him a bit difficult, has said things like, oh, he's being a pain at the moment going to sleep and stuff like that. But that isn't so much the bit of her life that she felt was keeping her not free.
Yeah.
And that was burning her. There is a lot of talk about that, in that she didn't in any way want to run away from her son. She wanted that responsibility. And even if maybe she wanted to sort of have a little bit of a life as a young woman without that tie, but certainly not on any sort of permanent level. But yet you still have that discussion of, kids can be difficult, and a grandmother that's, happy babysitting, but then suddenly has to become a mother again is a really important thing. And she's already, before this, kind of become another mother to another child, Zach, who does not have a good mother, and has become a motherly figure there. And that is a significant part, I think, of how that whole household dynamic worked. The fact that she did feel maternally towards Zach as well. And I also think mothers in general is a really massively big part of this book.
Yes.
Even in the terms
Yeah.
of literal, like, plotting wise, mothers are extremely important. I'll not say any more than that. But yeah, you've got so many mothers in there. You also have Sophie as a stepmother figure, and what that is like. It's explored from so many different angles. You have so many of the characters. I mean, this is a story that is set with kind of college student age, you know, upper teens, early 20s kind of age characters are a whole lot of them, but you get their parents in that quite a lot of the time as well. And it really does explore so many different parental, but specifically motherly relationships with these kind of older children, which is really, really fascinating. And it works really well for the book.
Yeah, and then kind of the last character, which is Sophie. I don't like Sophie was like a nice enough character, but it is just kind of like out of both Kim and Tallulah, she was like the most two-dimensional. I felt she's more like, I don't want to say like a Deus Ex Machina, but she's more like a plot device rather than a character in and of herself. It's not that I didn't enjoy listening to the chapters that she was the point of view, and like she had like her chapters were kind of, I think, the ones with, because like there's a lot of heavy stuff in there, so you needed a little bit of lightness and a little bit of humor, and I think that's what her point of view brought to the novel. I don't know if you kind of felt the same way at all.
I think I can probably agree with you there. I think, a lot of what she does is about the finding clues that bring this cold case back into the light again, you know, and kind of drives a lot of that. I quite liked as well how some of her sleuthing was very like technology and social media based. I thought that was done really well. I think that can often be done really, really cringy. But I thought in this book it worked really, really well. And that was something where, I guess you sort of couldn't have anyone that had been around before playing that role, because then why wouldn't they have figured it out sooner? Kind of things like that. So yes, in that sense, I do think she is more functional, as you say, than kind of a major character that you feel for. But like I said about like the stepmother stuff, you do get some of her backstory and some of her feelings. I do always find it funny that it is such a big trope, particularly in crime, for writers to write about writers and write about crime writers, and there are so many crime writers within crime books. It is really quite funny. But
one of our favourite books of last year.
Well, yes, very true, very true. It is a massive tropey thing, but it was quite, like I said, that kind of thing was amusing. And I think the fact that she was more detached from the situation, like you say, gives you some of that relief from what is some really intense stuff. So we won't explain too much of what goes on. I think we've both been trying to be quite vague of it, but there is definitely, between characters and in relationships, some abusive and manipulative and controlling behaviour that is very intense and hard to listen to. And also one of the reasons why I think this is so good in audio, not that you can't, and not that I can't, read the book and hear the people saying these things and be sucked in and feel uncomfortable and all that, but I do think there's something different about having to hear it. Having an external voice putting you through it, like the characters put through it, that really did make my chest flutter and make me very physically tense. And things like that I think, is really good. And both in the things that felt very unsafe and very dangerous, and also, I think, the times where potentially manipulation from characters can be very compelling, and can make you, I don't know, fall in love with them, like them, do what they want you to do, make you feel valued, make you think that you would do anything for them. Various things like that. I do think it was very powerful hearing that and having the characters that are doing those things literally in your ear to put you in people's perspectives of what is that situation like, that I think was, obviously intense. And especially when I binged a very I mean, a very tense, large chunk that I binged last night, and then I could tell I wasn't in the happiest of moods afterwards, because it really, really does affect you, which is, testament to the amazing writing and also the fantastic performance as well.
Yeah. So there are two other kind of main characters in here, Zach and Scarlett, who play a really important role in Tallulah's life. So Zach is Tallulah's baby daddy, I believe, is the common term, and Scarlett is this girl from a really kind of privileged posh background that studies at the same college that Tallulah's going to, and they kind of meet at a bus stop, and they kind of develop this relationship that is really important to both of them, and that is part of the catalyst of kind of the future events that kind of unfold. Again, we're kind of trying to be spoiler free as possible.
Well, I was gonna say on that, which, yes, I think spoiler free, but I think it is pretty spoiler free to say that there's some definite sexual tension.
Yes.
Because that is clear from their very first meeting.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that's really incredible, how well that's written. Again, sexual tension is something that can either be like appear non-existent or be really cringe.
Yeah.
But
yes.
But this I thought was so obvious. It was the tension there. Not necessarily what's going to happen in future isn't obvious, but the tension there was just, I can't explain how it was done, but it was so real and so definitely obvious that that is not a spoiler to say that there's some sexual tension there, because it is so clear from the off, and that is such a good thing, and that's sort of just I don't know, I really connected with that just instant feeling that there was something here that wasn't platonic and it had an edge to it, and there's definitely something in the air sort of thing that I thought was fantastic. And then this doesn't need to be a spoiler either, the fact that Scarlett is bi, and it's kind of at her party where because I think that happens, that information is revealed quite early on in the book. Pool party,
it's her pool party where Tallulah disappears as well, so and
there is definitely, I don't think there's any secret to anybody, there are definitely some issues with how bisexuality is presented in media and stuff like that. Things of like, connotations that bi people are promiscuous,
deceptive, that sort of thing,
and can't commit, and that it's a synonym for wants everybody all the time, and stuff like that, and also that just whether it's bisexuality or homosexuality or a plethora of different labels, that sort of reveal that, oh wait, it's the same gender, is kind of shocking, and is used as that is a problematic thing in media in general, and there are some bits of this where you could argue it sounded like that. There were some words and phrases that personally really made me wince and I didn't like, but I was able to convince myself that they were more from characters' perspectives, and as much as I dislike them, I kind of have to admit that people do think like that, and it is very fair that those things are written in there and things. I'm not saying that I think this is like amazing book, for the bi community, but I'm also not condemning it either. I don't think it's like a terrible one. There are some really terrible uses of it. There's some bits I don't love, but I did think there was also some good bits and some really interesting things about it. And it was also interesting, given that this is coming off the back of a review of Unfortunate Stars, talking about sexuality and people's internalized feelings about their sexuality, as well as what they think other people will think about it and stuff like that. That was really interesting, hopping from that book to this one and having some of the same themes explored in a very different setting.
I think I want to move on to like Joanna's narration. Just want to kind of pick up something really quickly about that kind of kind of sexual, like for me, like part of the kind of exploration of sexuality in here is also kind of the kind of sexual relations between people from different classes as well. It's kind of something I found how like when you're kind of dating with your own class, that can be kind of seen as kind of quite safe and the expected thing to do, and then like if you're aiming for someone who's in like a different class, or if you're dating down, and all that sort of like class dynamics also I think plays quite an important part in the story, especially in the way that I think for example, if someone from like the boarding school had disappeared, I think the police would have treated it in an entirely different way, as opposed to, you know, this is a working class girl from the local village
Oh,
sort of thing. So
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, class certainly plays a big part in it. And sort of the two things connected, the things around kind of experimenting and, you know, tying sexuality with class, that sort of idea that that girls in college will try things out and that some people can be, you know, used in that sense, is also connected in here with, like you say, dating down a class and using that as an experiment and experience rather than actually valuing as a person is definitely a thing that's in there, and that ties those things of class and sexuality together with this kind of a shared experience there of when boundaries are crossed. Are they actually being crossed, or is it someone dallying in an experience, which is very much a kind of from a privileged position thing, which is a huge thing in here. It made me think of sort of like, I think there's quite a few crime shows and stuff that I've seen, like at least advertised and stuff, that are sort of, you know, set in American sororities and stuff like that, and it's about the posh girls, but when some murder happens and, you know, how things are covered up and that sort of stuff, that definitely plays a huge part in it and is quite interesting. But and then this I think does, as you say, like interrogate it a little bit more rather than just divulging it being a less serious story or whatever.
So let's talk about Joanne's narration. I thought she was fucking brilliant. She is really like what a performance. What a performance. Like, she imbues the text with like such empathy, and the way she narrates, kind of like almost every sentence there's like nuance and understanding, and I love the way she did the voices. And I thought she was absolutely brilliant, absolutely magnificent.
No, I definitely agree. And I think this was my kind of thing before, like, you know, the beginning sections of sort of, okay, but what is there to write home about, you know? It's good, but as you get through, you really realise how spectacular that narration is, you know? This book isn't necessarily doing something as exciting in and of itself, like innovative, like, for example, True Crime Story that we recommended last year, because it's, you know, it's not really playing with the audio format or anything like that, but it is incredible narration that I really do think elevates, we've used this word before, but it's true, elevates that text. And voices definitely. I think particularly her characterization between Tallulah and Scarlett is fantastic, so much so that you could in some ways be convinced that it was two narrators kind of thing, you know. You very definitely, that is not someone's reading me this story and they're doing two voices. There's two people come to life that you have two very different images of, you know. They are very separate, and I think that is fantastic. I think her male characters, even so, you do get a little bit more of a feeling that, you know, this is someone else reading it, you know, this is a female performing the male's part. But even so, if you get like into a really deep bit with, you know, Zach kind of basically doing a monologue, you're not in any way brought out of it of like, oh, this is a woman reading that. No, like you can tell that she's done something to her voice to make it seem more masculine, but it's not meant to be his voice. But still, you are still sucked in. It's still like he is speaking to you and he is in your ear, which I think is fantastic. And really distinct voices, and not just kind of some are posh and some aren't, you know, you get real different voices between them. I mean, there are quite a few, like we said about all the different mothers, there are quite a few women of a similar age, and certainly ones that like work or have something to do with the boarding school. I don't know, maybe if you put those voices together, they may be slightly similar, but not in any sort of confusing way. It just is kind of, I mean, how many voices can one person do? You know, it was really, really fantastic performance. Absolutely stunning. I liked it, as I said before, from the off, with that kind of, that decision to make even the happy stuff have an overtone of cold and danger is coming, but not in any way that I thought the performance didn't suit the mood. You know,
Yeah.
it's not like I thought she was wrongly making stuff sinister when it wasn't. It was all perfectly done. Yeah,
Yeah.
can't recommend enough.
Yeah,
Really
I
good.
think she did like a fantastic job. I just want to make a quick note about Scarlett's voice. While it was like a brilliant performance, every time it's kind of, she reminded me of those I say those people on like those shows like Made in Chelsea or something
Right.
like that, and I just make like that kind of like, oh darling, and just that sort of accent just makes my skin crawl, which was
Yeah.
fantastic because there's is kind of quite accurate in terms of like that's how people like that sound. And
Yeah.
you can kind of, you felt that especially when in Tallulah sections when she's either talking to her mum or talking to Zach or Scarlett, you feel like you're in the room listening to a conversation between those two, which is, I think, a really like fantastic trick to be able to pull off. You don't feel like you're listening to someone talking to you. Feel like you're listening to two characters having a conversation. So yeah,
definitely. They completely came to life. And yeah, I get you about Scarlett. Definitely, you can see why her voice might be annoying, but annoying for the character. You know, not like this narrator is doing an annoying voice for this character kind of thing, which does happen. You know, there's definitely been audiobooks that I've listened to where I'm like, why did you do that voice for that character? That's just really grating and annoying. Because, like you say, it suits, and also just. Yeah, and maybe this is not a good thing, and it maybe worries me slightly, but the fact that there are a lot of reasons, including that annoying voice and what comes behind that, you know, the connotations of it, to not like Scarlett.
Yeah.
And yet, I felt a bit of that pull that Tallulah feels, you know?
I agree with that,
So, yeah, which, yes, maybe be slightly worried about, but we'll push that under the carpet, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of like the danger of charismatic people, isn't
Exactly.
it?
Exactly.
Kind of like,
and this is why, this book does it so well, because you can feel yourself in Tallulah's shoes. So definitely.
So I think that's kind of like a firm recommendation from both of us. I think this is a really strong candidate on the shortlist. So and it's not an author that I'd read before, and
no, but I think we've got to both check out some more because very good.
Okay, so any closing comments on that?
I think we covered most of what I was going to say, but I could talk about this for a long time. It was a very good book, and stick at it. If you're not sure that it's worth it, it's worth it. Yeah.
So the next one that we're going to do is the I was going to say the Thursday Murder Club, but that's the name of the
series.
First book.
Yeah.
It's the name of the series and the name of the first book. So I believe I'm going to be reading out the blurb for The Man Who Died Twice. It's the following Thursday. Elizabeth has received a letter from an old colleague, a man with whom she has a long history. He's made a big mistake and he needs her help. His story involves stolen diamonds, a violent mobster, and a very real threat to his life. As bodies start piling up, Elizabeth enlists Joyce, Ibrahim, and Ron in the hunt for a ruthless murderer. And if they find the diamonds too, well, wouldn't that be a bonus? But this time they are up against an enemy who wouldn't bat an eyelid at knocking off 4 septuagenarians. Can the Thursday Murder Club find the killer and the diamonds before the killer finds them?
Okay, and so this is, of course, written by Richard Osman. Richard Osman is an author, producer, and television presenter. The Thursday Murder Club is his first novel. He is well known for TV shows including Pointless and Richard Osman's House of Games. As the creative director of Endemol UK, Richard has worked as an executive producer on numerous shows including Deal or No Deal and 8 out of 10 Cats. Okay, so do you want to get started on this one again? Because I've got thoughts. Fair, okay, yeah. I'll give a bit of my personal background to this book, I guess, because Richard Osman, we are a big Richard Osman fan in this house. We watched Richard Osman's House of Games quite a bit. I did a spoof version of it for my mum's birthday, which had questions related to the family and stuff like that, which was very fun. So yes, and, you know, shows like 8 out of 10 Cats we've loved for ages and things like that. So yes, and I bought my mum the first book, but I don't believe she's actually read it yet, and I hadn't read it or listened to it yet. So I am going into this without having heard the first one. I did just go straight to this second one. And, I mean, one of the first things, again, a personal thing, there's a character called Poppy in it. Yes. I can't not make this one of the first things that I say, which is very weird for me, because I've not come across many things with poppies in. And when I have done before, I've not particularly liked it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this I didn't dislike as much, but it was very weird, especially hearing it rather than reading. Hearing my name said that many times, it was an odd experience. But yes.
That's not something I've ever thought about, because that's really not a risk with my name at all. So if there's a character called for head in a book, I'll be like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah, well, hopefully there are more of those in future, because it is a real shame that you find that. But yeah, I mean, I have found that in that it isn't as common a name.
Yeah.
But yeah, it crops up occasionally. And yeah, it's very weird. I'm sure that if you do find a book with a for head in it and you listen to it, you will find it weird, because I really did. And, you know, and I do wonder if it's something that people with more common names don't find as weird, because they hear it all the time.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, I don't hear it much. I've met a few poppies in my life, but not a ton. And it was very, very weird. It has nothing to do with the book. This is very much a ramble. And if anyone is coming to us fresh, thanks to the fact that we're doing this for the British Book Awards, hello. And I'm sorry that I've rambled for so long about my personal list, but it's very weird. Very weird. And then this, in connection with the book that we're doing at the moment, you know, partly by design, we've picked kind of the two crime ones to do together, but they're very different crime books, you know. The one we just talked about was very definitely a psychological thriller, and this more falls into the category of cozy crime. It's not the coziest cozy crime ever. It does touch on some difficult stuff and some potentially darker stuff than you'd usually find in your typical sort of, you know, country village fate, someone's been poisoned by a cake kind of cozy crime, which, yeah, was interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like, sort of like very much in that Midsummer Murders sort of thing, I would say. So let's kind of talk about the book. So it kind of, the inciting incident is basically Elizabeth, who's a former spy, and her ex-husband rocks up to the retirement village that they live in, which is called Cooper's Chase. And he basically says, you know, this is all really early on the book, so this is kind of like not massive spoilers, but he's stolen some diamonds from a very dangerous person, and now he's kind of like on the lam a little bit. So that's kind of like the inciting incident, and then from there things kind of snowball catastrophically. We end up with a lot of collateral damage and dead bodies from there on in. I'm just going to kind of get out and just like say I really didn't get on with this.
Right.
At all. I think part of it might have been because I just finished listening to The Night She Disappeared, and like the analogy that I'll use is like, you know, after you brush your teeth and then you kind of like, you might like drink orange juice, how that's a really kind of like jarring thing. And I think there's a little bit like that. It's kind of like going from one like flavor or kind of one like tone of book to another like this was a bit jarring. But even that said, if I was reading this novel, I probably would have put it down by the second chapter. It just wasn't really for me, which kind of speaks to the strength of Lesley Manville's narration, that she kept me going. She kind of like kept me in it, and it just makes me ask the question, is her performance better than Joanne Froggatt's? Because I like the text in Joanne Froggatt's book more, and I dislike this, but she was able to keep me engaged more in a text that I really didn't get along with as well. But maybe that's a question we'll kind of like discuss a little bit later on.
Well, maybe, but it's kind of an interesting thing for now as well, because I was sort of thinking that where in The Night She Disappeared, certainly by halfway through, I was really like, yeah, this is right in audio, because this narration is spectacular and is really elevating an already really good text.
Yeah.
And while I thought Leslie's was good, and I guess this is a bit like what I said last episode about Unfortunate Stars and how that narration pulled me through something I maybe wouldn't otherwise, you know, read. But yeah, I don't know, for this one, not in any way any disrespect to Leslie's narration, which I thought was good, but it came back to that question of what was it doing that was special, you know? And even though The Night That Disappeared wasn't doing anything, you know, format breaking, I still thought it really made use of audio and really, took advantage of that in her incredible performance. Whereas this one felt more to me like the book was being read aloud. I don't know so much how much it added. I think it was a brilliant performance and absolutely nothing to, not criticising it at all. But I don't know what made it an incredible audiobook, But yeah, it's just interesting that you said about, does that mean you think Lesley did an even better narration? Because I'd probably say no. If we're having to compete and stuff, not that she did it badly, in any way. And again, you can only do with what you're working with.
Yeah.
It's not in any way that I think it is a bad audiobook, but we very much do our podcast on, what makes this audio special.
Yeah.
And I think it was a very good audiobook, a one where if you for any reason choose to listen to it rather than read it, you're going to have a great experience listening to it. It does that wonderful thing of making a print book into an audiobook and them both being at least as good as each other.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I would say, anything was super exciting about the audio itself.
Yeah. I think I would agree. Well, in terms of production, there's nothing kind of particularly special about it. I think Lesley's got a very listenable voice. Is that a word?
She made me think of Maureen Lipman, that we just did the reviews of her when she was narrating the Jill Tomlinson books.
Yeah.
There was some of that in her voice and accent, I think. And very pleasant to listen to.
Very pleasant. I mean, so pleasant to listen to. I almost fell asleep a couple of times. So it's kind of like one of those ones where...
if that's why you use audiobooks, then this is certainly not a bad one for that.
Not a bad one for that. So that's something I'm gonna have to wrestle with a little bit in terms of what I actually think. Like for me, she did more with less. So maybe that's a contributing factor. Let's talk a little bit about the book though. So the Thursday Murder Club, we've got Elizabeth, who's an ex-spy, Ron, who's this kind of like gruff working class ex-trade union person, Joyce, who's this kind of like deceptively sweet, kind of like makes out she's more naive than she actually is character. And then we've got Ibrahim, who's a psychologist. And I just want to say really quickly, if it wasn't for the chapter with, I think it's might be the third or fourth chapter, which kind of focuses on an incident with Ibrahim, I might have stopped listening to, because that, to me, that chapter there about his kind of his journey into town and his life story, that to me was like an almost like pitch perfect short story.
Right.
And I don't think there's another section of text in the book that soars anywhere near the same heights as that. And that's kind of convinced me to keep listening to it. I just thought, if there's another section like that in this book, then it might be something a little bit special. But like, sadly for me, nothing really came close to that section. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm totally, and I was actually going to pull out him as well and his kind of parallel story that runs into it. Because of the incident that happens, he doesn't take as much of an active part in this sort of investigation stuff in it. And yet keep going back to him and how he was feeling and how he was responding to that incident and just learning more about him, like you say. Getting to know him as a character, how lovely he is with, like, is it Ron's grandson?
Yes.
I think, or something like that.
Kendrick.
They were really, really great moments. I think Ibrahim is a really great character. And I think definitely added something really, really valuable to this book. I think his storyline and, as you say, the writing around him and stuff like that. It's interesting that we both pulled that bit out because, I think that was one of the strongest bits of the book.
Yeah, and obviously this is about an aging cast of characters, so themes about capability, if they've missed a step, what happens kind of next. Elizabeth's husband suffers from, I'm not too sure if it's Alzheimer's or dementia. Maybe it's specifically spelled out in the first book but obviously his kind of memories going, and that I think gives another meaning of kind of like dying twice as well.
I also think on that as well, in the slightly more humoury ways, because it is a delicate balance in that one, because you do have those serious things, and again, the way that Ibrahim feels about what happened is partly related to how he feels about aging and getting older and, the time he has left and things, which is really sad. And there's a lot of stuff about that. But then you also get sort of light relief moments, and not in a making fun of elderly people way, I don't think.
No, I don't think so, no.
But kind of a nice thing. So like there was a bit of like, we can use the iPad this evening and do a little bit of research, which really made me laugh because it made me think of both my gran and my partner's grandma, who have both spoken in basically that exact same way of, oh, well, I'll just get my iPad out and we'll check it on there, which, that really amused me. That was a nice moment. And I think a lot of his inspiration for this series has come from, I think, his mum and the retirement village that she's in and stuff, didn't it? And kind of some actual stories and some characters and some personalities and things from that. And I think that probably shines through in the book.
Yeah, I think one thing I will say, I think Richard Osman genuinely has a great deal of affection for the characters that he's created. I think as a result of that, though, he doesn't really put them in any actual jeopardy in this book. So I didn't really feel like at any point that either Elizabeth or Ron or Joyce, or even, what happens to Ibrahim, that there were any kind of like actual jeopardy of them being seriously hurt or dying or suffering some sort of emotional damage. So I think kind of like it just felt a little bit safe from their perspective.
But I think that's the thing, because it does fall into that cozy crime category. And I think you make a very good point that you probably will have been coloured by coming straight from the night she disappeared. I actually listened to them the opposite way round.
Okay.
So I can't really comment on that so much. But I do also, I'm probably more familiar with cozy crime than you are. I'm quite a big fan, TV-wise at least, of the Agatha Raisin stories and stuff like that.
It's not a genre I'd ever touch. So,
which is totally fair, and that is very much, if any of your core characters in a cozy crime thing, you thought they might die, I'm sorry. They would, everyone would riot. It would not be okay. I think that is, very definitely a genre thing where you have a core group of detectives or amateur detectives or whatever thing like that, and they are gonna travel with you in every single story, and every time that 70,000 people seem to die in this one small village, those guys are gonna be okay. I think is very much a thing of the genre, but it's a fair point that is then a different experience for you if you're not worried about that kind of jeopardy in there. But I would argue that is much more a personal taste thing about the genre than it is about Richard's writing, and that a lot of people will really like that comfort. Those talks kind of around about the fact that cozy crime is really booming at the moment because people need some of that security, in the news and just general life. Things are pretty crap. And people are really feeling a yearning for, I maybe don't necessarily want all this terrible, tense, psychological stuff all the time. Actually, I'd quite like something that is still going to be an interesting kind of puzzle murder. How's it going to go? But I don't need to be on the edge of my seat. And I think they're definitely kind of in general doing quite well at the moment because they are feeding that need of people to be distracted, which I think crime does really good because you are trying to, piece it together and get drawn in that way, but without so much the emotional turmoil, I guess.
I mean, I did just want to say a couple of positive things about. I think the characters are all really well done. They're all 3D characters. Elizabeth, Ron, and Joyce, and Ibrahim are all kind of like, you can kind of like,
and Bogdan as well. I really like Bogdan,
and as well as the two police officers. I can't remember their names at the moment, but I feel that their interactions with each other and their dialogue was quite well written, and I do think generally Richard does write quite well. I think it's just this is not a genre or a story that I cared for. Also, it's from the sounds of you, this is a genre that you're a little bit more familiar with. How do you think this sits in with kind of like the all other sort of stuff in this genre, and kind of how do you feel that the kind of as an audiobook it kind of performed against that stuff?
So definitely more familiar than you, but nowhere near as familiar as a lot of people will be, the people that will absolutely devour those series and stuff like that. So I won't claim to be a complete expert or devotee or whatever. But yeah, it is something I know more than you. And yeah, I thought it was good. But I don't know how special, you know? It's not made me rush to go and read the first one or go and listen to the first one because it hasn't overly compelled me. But I didn't dislike it either. I enjoyed it. It was worth a listen for me, I think. But yeah, I don't know how much I have to shout home about it with. But I completely agree with you about the characters, yeah, being really good. And especially, going back again, the narration to voice those characters so separately. Again, I felt like I had them come to life in front of me and very different images of them as people rather than someone is voicing these characters, which is really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did like about this how cozy crime can definitely fall into a lot of very non-transgressive stuff. It can be very much the country village, and these are the values of the country village, and they're not really challenged by the end of the book, kind of thing, which can be a bit problematic and stuff like that. One thing that I think this book does well is that it does add some challenge to some things in there. Things especially about misogyny and sexual discrimination that's talked about, specifically less so much in the cozy village, but in massive institutions like, MI5 or whatever, and how that translates to just, business in general and stuff like that. There was a lot about, certainly back when Elizabeth was there, but the fact that it's still, how sex can or has been used as a way to manipulate underlings, or as a way to get ahead, or as the only way to get ahead, potentially, as a female. And yeah, misogyny in general and people with misogynistic attitudes and stuff like that, which I thought was really good how this book did challenge that throughout. It didn't do a massive essay on it, which, you wouldn't want. That's not the part of the book, but that it did challenge those rather than reinforcing them. Because, yeah, I think it is easy to reinforce those things, especially when things are like genre tropes and stuff like that. So that was one thing that I thought was really strong of this book, especially because it's focusing on characters of an older generation, and older views and stuff like that. But it was, I guess, progressive is maybe the word. But I thought there was some good stuff in that.
I mean, Ron is basically the closest that you get to someone with like old-fashioned views, really.
I thought Elizabeth's ex definitely is the main one for that.
So I think that's quite true. The other thing I think bothered me a little bit, and I think obviously it's due to kind of like the slightly twee tone in the book, is kind of like how casually like some of the murders are treated, and also like there's like quite a lot of institutional corruption, and I was just waiting for like Ted Hastings from Line of Duty to kind of like barge in and say, what you think you're doing there, fella? So it's kind of like that's kind of the other thing that kind of like bothered me, but that, again, that's kind of a function of the genre.
Yeah, I get you, but I did like sort of tying with what I just said. I kind of liked that the corruption was, flagged as corruption. And that was kind of pointed out in there. But yeah, I agree with you about the flippancy of the murders, and I think that is definitely a genre thing, because you don't want, in a cozy crime, to be too attached to these characters that are going to die, because kind of part of the reason of it being cozy is that you're not going to be feeling like that. And yeah, I think what Richard has done in making it cross that boundary into slightly more serious then maybe doesn't add up, because you're made to connect with characters and find their death upsetting, and yet you're also meant to brush off any of the deaths that are in the cozy crime, because you're not meant to be too affected by it. So that maybe could do with some work for, okay, if you're going to cross one boundary, you need to think about how it's going to affect the other stuff. So yeah, I can agree with you there. That did feel a little bit odd, like, wait, are we not supposed to care? But I kind of do.
So how did you feel? Because I think a lot of one of the big reasons why people read or listen to crime novels is trying to figure out the mystery at the center of it. How did you feel that unfolded? I was kind of quite satisfied with the kind of like clues and the way that unfolded, and it did kind of keep me guessing a little bit as well. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think there was some good kind of back and forth of sending you down one direction and actually it's a different direction. So yeah, I think that was good. And I do actually want to say that about The Night She Disappeared as well, which I didn't actually mention, because I thought that was very good. There was kind of a part of it that you could say figure out, but in reality, it was just me hoping it was going to happen. So yeah, but maybe there was some picking up on the clues there, but it might have also just been me crossing my fingers and hoping it would be the case. But still, even with that piece of the puzzle in there, I couldn't figure out how it then added up with the other stuff that I knew. I was really missing that piece, which I thought was really clever. And I loved the ending, both kind of the ending and resolution of the mystery, but then also the epilogue at the end was fantastic. And we've spoken before how I'm very difficult to please with endings. Yeah. And I think as well, with what you've just said, with crime, it's very difficult because you do want to be left satisfied. You do want to think that was convoluted enough that, you know, it was a justified, puzzly, complexy mystery, but you also don't want to feel like, well, that was just a bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, it's a really difficult one to do, and I thought that one did it fantastically. And then I think The Man Who Died Twice was quite good as well. It pulls threads together quite well at the end. I'm okay with that.
There's a bit of silliness in both books, kind of like you need to kind of like take certain leaps in both books, but I think the puzzle element, the kind of like that whodunit aspect of the man who, I said the knight that died twice there, that's the man who died twice, was kind of like quite good. And I agree with the ending, and this I think might be a slightly overblown compliment, but the ending that Richard Osman wrote for this kind of slightly reminded me some of the endings that Terry Pratchett wrote towards the end of his book, in terms of like how he progresses things and kind of like wrap things up and say, right, this is kind of like, you know, this thing that you thought that I'd forgotten about, this is actually what happens to that sort of thing. And kind of like, so I felt he did that quite well. I think he's a really capable, skilled writer. It's just I won't be reading any other books in this particular series. It's just not my cup of tea.
No, that's fair. And I feel, as you could probably be able to tell from my preamble before we start talking about this, I do feel bad criticising this book because I am such a big Richard Osman fan.
I love Richard Osman.
In general.
He's one of my favourite Taskmaster contestants ever.
But... it was so good. He was the first episode that I watched of Taskmaster. This is completely off topic, but the first episode that I watched was the Series 2 episode with the exercise balls on top of the hill. Because it just happened to be on. That was the first one that I watched, and then I've loved it since. And he's a very good Taskmaster contestant. Completely agree. And he's fab. And I certainly, should he potentially happen upon this podcast, I really wouldn't want any sort of offence being taken at all. I do think it is a good book. I think it's a good book, and I think it definitely, like you say, it shows some of his real craft in there. He puts some really fantastic moments in there. We know how I love language, and I really thought...
he's very kind of clever, witty
definitely.
jokes in there, so
Yeah, and I loved the bit where Ibrahim talks about the specificity of words, and what do you think of when you think of a monkey versus versus a penguin. It's a really interesting section and things like that. I think there are some real gems, some hidden diamonds in this book. And definitely don't want to criticize, but yes, I think that it didn't necessarily have something in it that really, really made me go, wow, I want to rave about this everywhere. And that's not a criticism to it as the book, but just our honest review. I thought it was good. I'm not in any way going to tell people they shouldn't bother with it. I think it's worth trying.
I wouldn't say not bother with it. It's just, it just wasn't for me. I think there's, for me, it was, its flaws don't really outweigh its benefits. I know lots of people really, really love this book, and quite rightly really love Richard Osman, and kind of Lesley Manville again, I think did a lot. For me, she did a lot of heavy lifting with this book. So I think her narration does deserve kind of like special notes there. So I think out of the two books that we reviewed, I think definitely I preferred The Night She Disappeared to The Man Who Died Twice. How do you feel out of these two books? Which one did you prefer?
If you're gonna make me pick a favorite, then yes, I'm gonna pick The Night She Disappeared. But with the order that I listened to them, so I had the whole of the Richard Osman one, and then from the first few hours of The Night She Disappeared, I was in a similar brain space to what I've now been saying about The Man Who Died Twice, in that I think it's good. I think it's a good example of its genre, and if you like that genre and devour all of it, then this is definitely one to add to the list, but I don't know what's special. I think the difference for me was that The Night She Disappeared got special.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, the second half of that book is kind of just something else. Okay, so that's your lot, guys. The next two books we're going to be reviewing: Careless by Kirsty Capes, as narrated by Amber Gadd, and The Wizard of Once, Never and Forever by Cressida Cowell, as narrated by David Tennant. So that's going to be on the next episode. As always, guys, please continue to support the podcast, either by donating in the tip jar, follow us on social media, and please leave a rating or review wherever you found this podcast. And again, thanks to Chloe and all the good folks over at the British Book Awards. If you go to their website, kind of like we're one of the official supporters, which is kind of like quite a big deal.
Oh, that's so exciting.
for
I'm
us.
buzzing.
So once again, thank you for all the support, guys, and get in touch.
Thank you so much.
And keep supporting us. Thanks, guys.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.